The girl, she bled. Bitter looked down and took hold of Jam's face. Her voice ringed with alarm. "Your blood get on the canvas, Tutu?" Jam lowered her eyes. "Accident," she whispered, then rubbed her fist to her chest, palm down, an apology. "Nothing to be sorry for, sweetness, nothing at all." Bitter hugged her tight, her face old with worry. "You couldn't have known," Aloe added, and his voice shook only a little. Bitter looked back at Pet. "So what are you here for, then? What is it you want?" Pet crouched down and slid its spine from side to side as if stretching. "It is not a want, it is a who. The why is monstrous. The when is here." Jam drew away from her parent slightly, stepping closer to Pet. Aloe began to reach to pull her back, but Bitter stopped him. "Leave her," she whispered. "It can't hurt her, she the one who brought it over, not the one it looking for." "Oh, it's now you want to trust it?" His wife cut her eyes at him. "You know, you does real act as if you weren't there when all this happened first time," she hissed. "I know you does like to forget things when it convenient, but turn on your brain and use your sense. You remember how this work." Aloe grimaced but didn't argue. He took Bitter's hand instead, and they watched their daughter. Jem stood in front of Pet. Her stomach was nodding up. If Pet had come to hunt someone, it couldn't be a coincidence that it had come through her and her mother. She switched back to talking to it in her head. "Can't you tell me who you came to hunt?" she asked. Pet's head angled down to face her. "A monster," it replied, and Jam's stomach plummeted. They looked at each other, a silent understanding throbbing between them. It was an answer she'd been expecting without knowing she'd been expecting it. Of course there were still monsters, Jam thought. Could you really make something stop existing just by shoving it away somewhere else? "Jam, what are you doing?" Aloe's voice interrupted, and Jam held up his hand to silence them. "Who's the monster? What does it look like?" Pat hummed, a light vibration shaking through the room. "I don't know yet. I am rife with unknowns. Part of the hunt is to make the not known known, so just to me or us, but to the not knowers, so that they may know. The truth is in the knowing. But how are you going to find it then?" Pat's voice turned sarcastic again. "I feel it, little girl, that you're rather missing the point of this being a hunt." Jam glared at it. "Every hunt has to start somewhere," she snapped back. "You have to have a place to begin." Pat reached out with its imposter hand and absent-mindedly picked out part of Jam's sleep-flattened afro with his fingers. It was something Bitter would do, almost as if the hands had retained some memory of her mother. "I do have a beginning," it admitted. Jam folded her arms. "Okay, then tell me." Pat withdrew its arm and patted down a reddened tuft of fur on its chest. "The House of Redemption," it replied. Chapter 4. After that, Bitter and Aloe sent Jam to bed. She tried to argue with them, but her parents were firm, paying attention now, putting space between her and Pet. "We could handle it from here, sweetness," Bitter said. "It's not fair," Jam sighed. "I want to stay. I'm the one who brought it over." "You're a child," Aloe said, his voice a thick line. "It's 2 o'clock in the morning and your mother's painting is standing here in our bedroom." He shook his head, irritated. "It's enough. Go and sleep." Bitter rolled her eyes. "It's right there. You don't have to keep calling it a painting." "I will call that thing whatever I want to call it," Aloe snapped, and Jam shot a worried glance at Pat, expecting it to react to the hostility in her father's voice. But Pat hadn't moved. It just kept watching them with its implacable face, its weight loud on the floorboards, translating directly to Jam's feet. Bitter pulled Jam into a hug, kissing her face. "Go to sleep, Doo-Doo. Come morning, all will be well, I promise you." Jam didn't believe her, but the silk of Bitter's nightgown was soft against her cheek, and Jam felt a wave of exhaustion drag her over her. The spike of the past hour or so began to plummet into a crash, adrenaline's abandoning her body. Bitter kept an arm around her and steered Jam toward the door. "Taking the girl to the she room," she said, directing her words at Aloe, pretending that she wasn't talking to Pat, getting its permission to remove Jam. Everyone could feel how the creature was focused on the young girl. The way it edged protectiveness was biting through the air. Bitter was being careful. Jam twisted around to look at Pet. "Will you be here in the morning?" she asked, just between the two of them. It gave her a golden nod. "What must be hunted, whether it is night or day, no matter how long it takes," it answered. "I will be here, little girl." She nodded and let Bitter take her to her room, let her mother tuck her into bed the way she used to when Jam was smaller. It felt comforting this time, a memory of a ritual that gestured safety. "Where will you put your bonnet?" Bitter asked as Jam climbed into the bed. and slid her legs between the cotton sheets. She parted under the pillows, then looked around the room and pointed to a small puddle of satin lying on the floor. Bitter picked it up and stretched the elastic to fit it over Jam's afro. She adjusted it against her forehead, and Jam lay back against her pillow, watching her mother watching her. Bitter looked so worried. "You could sleep, Jam, she asked. "Don't worry," Jam sighed. "I'm good." It was almost a convincing lie. Her mother sighed. "I'm real sorry about the painting. It wasn't supposed to happen." Jam shrugged and managed to smile. "It's not that scary." Bitter gave her a sad smile back. "My brave girl," she murmured. For a moment it looked like she wanted to stay with Jam, make sure she really was okay. There was a time when she would sit beside Jam's bed and read her N.K. Jemisin books until Jam drifted off, only leaving when sleep wrapped heavily around the room. But this time Jam could see how Pet's presence was bothering her, how Bitter needed to go and handle that. Jam knew her mother would want answers, explanations. Things unraveled into a pattern that she could accept as rational. Bitter always needed to organize, to tidy up, and right then Pet was an explosion of loose ends she couldn't ignore. Jam decided to forgive her for leaving. "Good night, darling." Bitter switched off the light and shut the door behind her. Ever since she was a child, Jam had hated having the hallway light spilling into her room, and she'd always preferred the night to enfold her in its full black. As the song of her mother's footsteps faded through the floorboards, Jam let out a breath that had been choked in her chest and stared up at the ceiling, air spooling out from her mouth into the nothingness around her. Her lungs felt unstable, jittery. She tried to imagine Bitter and Aloe alone with Pet. Pet's bulk filling up their bedroom. Aloe's scared anger bouncing helplessly off it. They would be fine. She knew they would be fine. Pet wasn't going to hurt them. It didn't hurt anything. It wasn't hunting. Somehow she already knew and trusted and believed that. And besides, what it was hunting was in Redemption's house. A vision of her best friend floated across Jam's mind. His smile, his wrapped hands after fight training. Was he being hurt right now by the monster? Why hadn't he said anything to her? Or maybe nothing had happened yet. Maybe Pet was there to stop something from happening. That loosened Jam's anxiety, but not by much. Redemption could take care of himself, she hoped. He'd been a fighter since he was little. He was fast and strong, and who could hurt him? Who would even want to hurt him? He was threaded with nothing but gentleness. Even when he fought, Redemption fought for the beauty of what his body could do, for the frailty of being human, the power and vulnerability tangled up in being flesh. It wasn't personal. It wasn't about his ego. It was about being alive. She remembered when he'd explained this to her, when she'd asked him why he loved being something so violent. "I don't hold violence in my hands," he'd answered, holding them up in front of his face. He and Jam had been lying on a grassy hill behind the school, one they liked to roll down, watching the sky bump and skip and hiccuped blue as gravity played with them. Jam had her head on his shoulder, and Redemption smelled like cut grass and salt and himself. When his voices started deepening, his shoulders grew broader, his throat ridged. Jam had been fascinated. It was what would have happened to her in another time, another life. She watched as he rotated his wrists to look at his palms and then the backs of his hands, a few nicked scars marking his knuckles. "You fight," she'd said. "Of course you hold violence in your hands," she meant. "You fight," she'd said. "Of course you hold violence in your hands," she meant. Redemption heard what she hadn't said out loud and shook his head. "Here," he said, tapping his chest. "Here is where I hold it, and I look at it, and I fold it into something else, even when I fight. It's not about letting it out, especially when I fight." Jam frowned, and he took her hand in his, running his fingers over the tendons that traced to her fingers. "We think we're so strong," he explained. "Some people want to show how strong they are when they fight. They want to prove it by grinding the other person down. You don't?" He bent her fingers one by one, cracking the knuckles. "For what? We're both alive when we fight. We're magnificent. We're testing our aliveness against each other. How fast is your alive? How smooth is your alive? How hard? How resilient? We're alive because we can be hurt. We're alive because we can heal. I think it's beautiful. It's why I fight." Jam smiled. "Uncle Hibiscus teach you that?" Hibiscus was Redemption's trainer. A tall man with muscles like jerky, tough and lean, faster than a snake strike, most of all one of the angels of Lucille. He was a rare example of someone who had been key to the revolution but chose not to get involved in leadership when it was all over. I just wanted us to get free, he always said. I was useful for the time. When people asked him if he'd ever get involved again, he would shrug. Call me when we need to fight, he'd say. Hibiscus also didn't like talking about the revolution. He wasn't interested in reliving the old days. He left them behind for a reason, he said. There were rumors about where he learned to fight like that when he'd done during the revolution, why he didn't want to talk about it. When Bitter told Jam that the angels must have had to do dark things, hard things, Jam had thought of Hibiscus and the way his eyes sometimes looked like sad stones embedded in his head. He had no children, just a wife, Glass, who ran a small healing spa next to the gym Hibiscus owned, where she trained Redemption and a couple of other kids. Hibiscus is teaching me many things, Redemption answered. What to bring into the ring, what to leave out of it. It's a good way to think about life. The two of them had remained on the grass until the chill of the evening started to set in. Then they'd gone home. Jam to her whispering floorboards, and Redemption to what Jam now saw as the sweet-laced trap, his home that was a monster harbor. She turned over in her bed and draped an arm off the edge, her fingers skimming the wood and the floor. It was another way of listening to the house, touching it directly, fine-tuning the vibrations that were coming from her parents' bedroom. They were faint, deliberately so. Her parents were probably trying not to wake her up or alarm her, but Jem could still feel the anxiety and fear, like a spilled sourness soaked up by the floor, circulating through the house. She could feel Pet's cool weight, indifferent to Bitter's distress and Aloe's anger. It was calm even as her parents' emotions spiked and ebbed, twisted and spat. Pet remained one steady, humming, unmoved line. Eventually, when Bitter's and Aloe's sounds became tired, pleading even, Pet stirred, but only to fade. Jem could feel that it was gone. No, not gone. It had moved. She pressed her fingers harder against the floor. Ah, to the studio. Maybe it was pretending to be painting again. Jem wanted to stay awake and think about what to do, what they had talked about once she'd left, but she was tired. As if a blanket made of world was pressing down on her, she pulled her hand up and slipped it into the cool under her pillow, sleep diving over her like a wave. Bitter and Aloe were in the kitchen when Jem came down in the morning, still wearing her pajamas. She'd brushed her teeth and put her hair in rough braids after dampening it with water. Little things to delay coming downstairs and facing the conversation she knew was lurking, waiting. It was rare that Jem felt distinct from her parents. Those moments when she was reminded that while in some ways they were a unit of three, in other and older ways, Bitter and Aloe were a unit of two, and she, Jem, was an addendum. A loved and cherished addendum, sure, but still an addendum. This morning felt like such a moment. Jem knew they'd talked and come to some sort of decision while she was asleep. The house was faintly anxious but firm underneath, mirroring their loud emotions, so Jem had braced herself for whatever they wanted to tell her about Pet. She was hoping they weren't upset with her for what happened in the night, for cutting herself on the canvas and not telling them, for having a creature shock them out of sleep. She stepped into the kitchen, frowning when she saw her parents. They both looked too brittle. She didn't like it, the way fatigue was ringing their eyes in dark circles. Bitter was refilling her cup with coffee, wearing a tank top and gray shorts, her legs wild lengths extending out. Leafy plants lined the walls, and the skylight bathed the table in the center of the room in morning sun. It was always crowded with succulents that Bitter kept buying at the farmer's market, and Jem kept trying to relocate into other parts of the house so they could actually use the table. Aloe was standing at the stove, barefoot, in a rumpled jalabaya, stirring a pan. A chopping board lay on the counter next to them, littered with onion skins, chili ends, and squeezed limes. Jem could smell the saltfish bourgeois he was making. As they heard her enter, they both turned and smiled in a way that was designed to hide their worry but failed terribly. Good morning, my daughter. Aloe spooned out some bourgeois on a plate, sprinkled finely chopped shadow bitty as a garnish, and handed it to Jem. There was also sliced avocado drizzled with lime juice and 3 triangles of toast already buttered. If you want more, come and take, he said. Jem signed a quick thank you and sat down at the table, moving a few tiny bright cacti out of the way. Bitter joined her, cupping her long fingers around the curve of her coffee mug. You sleep okay, Doo-Doo? Jem nodded, arranging bourgeois and avocado on her toast. She could still feel faintly Pet from the studio. Aloe sat down as well, leaving his plate empty on the counter. We want to talk to you about what happened last night, he said. Bitter glared at him. Relax yourself. Let the child eat her food first. I'm okay, Jem said. She just wanted to get it over with. Her father put a hand on her shoulder. His panic from the previous night was gone, replaced by a worried resolve. Jam knew the expression well. She had seen it on his face at enough doctor appointments. It was the look he wore when he channeled his fear about everything into the singular focus of protecting her. When he made the decisions that could have soothed his anxiety with their firmness, their surety. "We have something to tell you," he said, then glanced at Bitter and back at Jam before taking a deep breath. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened with your mother's work." He paused, gathering his voice to say more. "It seemed difficult a long time ago when we were a baby a little older than you or around your age," he continued. "Something came through a painting." Jam watched her father's face drift into a twisted but soft sadness. "It's strange how we can remember so much of it after all this time, how it felt, what happened afterward," he said, his words getting quieter. "I wish still every day that we would forget." Jam bit down on her toast and looked at her mother with wide eyes, unwilling to break the spell that her father's remembering. Their reaction last night had told some of the story plainly enough, but still hearing it said outright was something else. Bitter caught the curiosity leaping out from Jam's eyes and shook her head. "The details aren't important," she said. The sadness was in her eyes, too, but she was armoring it away, locking it into a box even as she spoke. "Just know how many bad things came from that. Plenty people got hurt. I don't want you forced into the kinds of decisions I had to face." It was a different time," Aloe interjected quickly. "There were monsters to hunt. That part was understandable, but Lucille was changed." "This one has to have the wrong place." Bitter nodded. "We think the creature must be mistaken, you see, a dangerous mistake. It came out into the wrong time, that's all. It just needs to go back now," Aloe said. "It's all a misunderstanding." Jam turned her head from one to the other, waiting for the rest of it. Her parents exchanged looks stuffed with silent words, then Bitter put down her coffee mug and leaned forward. "You know how the creature came out of the painting, Jam? Jam dusted crumbs off one hand and signed a correction, "Pet." Bitter paused, her eyebrows nodding. "What?" Jam almost rolled her eyes, spelling it more slowly. "P-E-T. "What do you mean, pet?" Aloe leaned forward as well. "You tried to pet it, or what?" "That's its name," Jam said, and her voice unexpected in the kitchen's air. Both her parents jerked back in surprise, then looked at each other again. Jam sighed and went back to her food. They had such loud conversations around her, even when they weren't using their words, as if she couldn't understand all the other kinds of languages that didn't need sound. This one, the one they were speaking with their eyes, was saying that they knew now even more worried than they had been before. Now that they knew Pet had a name, so there had to be something about the name that bothered them. Maybe it made Pet seem more like an individual, not just a random creature popping out of a painting. Maybe it had something to do with whatever had happened before with Bitter's work. Jam had no idea, and she could tell that her parents were busy thinking a small separate bubble that was about protecting her but didn't actually include her. The bubble that was their relationship, their marriage, somehow none of her business. She didn't try to interfere. The bourgeois was salty in her mouth, smeared smooth with avocado, small crunches of onion and toast fragments. Jem focused on that and waited till they decided what they were or were not going to tell her. "How do you know it has a name?" Aloe asked. "Did you give it one?" "Oh, still on the name then." Jam shrugged. "It told me." It told you to have a name?" Bitter asked. "Close, but not technically. Told me what to call it," Jam answered. "What you were called and what your name was were not the same thing." She knew that much. Aloe was frowning, focused on her. "You're not scared of it?" he asked. Jem shrugged again, but didn't say anything past that. It was clear that her parents were scared of Pet in a way that was different from hers. She'd never met anything like it before, never seen a painting burst at its seams in that way, but they had. Maybe that's why they were more afraid. They knew things she didn't know, things they didn't want to share, things that were connected to Pet in patterns Jem couldn't see yet, but there was something off about it. They were treating Pet as if it was dangerous, and it wasn't as if it wasn't. Jem had felt enough of the menace Pets did a good job of concealing to know that yes, Pet was dangerous. It was just that she knew it wasn't dangerous to her, and that seemed to be where she and her parents were diverging. Bitter took Jem's hand and turned it over to expose the bandage on her palm. Jem looked up into the black wells of her mother's eyes. "You cut your hand in the studio, eh?" Bitter asked her gently. Jem nodded and her mother patted her hand, releasing it. Aloe was visibly distraught, but he pressed his mouth close. "It's how it does happen," Bitter murmured, blood calling. "What does it mean?" Jem asked. "It's what brings them over," Aloe said. His voice was wound so tight, Jem was surprised it wasn't shaking. "We never figured out the exact details or how. That first time was enough." "But you knew it was blood," Jem said. She watched their eyes slide again into an unfocused memory, the slight wince that shuddered under Bitter's skin. Whatever they kept remembering, it was painful. "We knew," her mother said, with a full stop that barricaded any further questions. "But hear me now, you could reverse this, send it back. It has to listen to you, Aloe added. Understanding clicked into place in Jam's mind. Because of the blood, she said. They looked back at her sadly. We don't like to ask you to do this, Bitter said. But once you send it back, everything good, just so everything nice. Aloe put his hand on Jam's shoulder again. All you have to do is tell it, and it has to obey you. It will be all over. Kapam. He snapped his fingers, a small bullet of a sound breaking against his palm. She could feel how badly he wanted that to be true, how badly they both wanted it. They didn't know the bit about redemption, but Jam already felt as if it wouldn't matter. At some point last night, they decided that Pat was wrong, that Jam would be safer without it here. They wouldn't believe Pat, not even for redemption. Adults were like that so much of the time, inflexible when they thought they had something to protect. What if you're both wrong, she said, her hands blurring. It said the monster was in Redemption's house. What if something bad is happening there? She was surprised at herself for telling them that, but she had to try. If Redemption's safety was at stake, then it was worth it, this desperate attempt to get them to open their eyes and change their minds. Jam knew she'd lost when Bitter just smiled back and touched her face like a brief feather. It knows redemption means a lot to you, her mother said. I'm not surprised it would say something like that to persuade you to let it stay. We've done this before, Aloe said. You have to trust us, my dear. Jam lowered her head under the weight of their blinkered love and pushed her plate away, half her food untouched and the rest of it sour in her stomach. Okay, she signed and got up from her chair. Bitter stood as well, wringing her hands together. They all knew Jam was going back to the studio where Pat was waiting, either in the air of the room itself or the air beyond it, on the other side. I could come too, her mother offered, but Jam shook her head, refusing. She could feel their heavy gazes drag across her back as she left the kitchen, and she knew they'd feel better if she said something, anything, that showed that she understood their decision and chosen to be on their side, a unit of three again. But Jam was silent as she walked out, because the only thing in her chest was low kind of bitterness, a sort of feeling trapped and not being heard. They hadn't cared when she had mentioned redemption, and she'd anticipated that, but it was still a disappointment to be waved aside so easily. Bitter and Aloe had decided as a unit of two that they could sit with their decision then, just the two of them alone. Jam went up to the studio, feeling close to bursting into tears. She couldn't tell if it was from fear or sadness or anger or frustration. It was just there, right behind her eyes. The studio door was firmly closed, and Jam took a deep breath before turning the knob. It opened silently, and as she stepped in, she felt Pat's presence accumulate, the loudness of it growling through the floorboards and into the soles of her feet. Jam closed the door behind her and looked around. Pat stepped out of the corner, still massive, still gold-streaked fur and hard blood-curled horns. Here to banish me, little girl? Of course it already knew. Jam shrugged and stared at the patterns on its face. Here to erase me, it continued, its voice trailing looped faint smoke into the air. Here to push me into the black, away from the eyes. I am too loud, too saying loud things, too looking loud. Your parents think if you wipe me away, you can wipe away the inside of my mouth, the things I came with that live there. They don't even know. They know enough to want me gone. They know the shape of the thing from the edges. What do you think, little girl? Jam gazed at the floor, focusing on a small splatter of blue paint that looked as if the sky had bled and no one had cleaned it up in time. I think they're afraid, she said. Pat leaned its head back and forth, horns tipping over, gold-feathered throat exposed and then curved forward. It said. What else do you think? You want to say the line, the striking line, the erasing line? It sat down carefully in front of her, avoiding its own torn canvas in the middle of the floor, folding its great muscular legs and draping its arms in loose lines. Its hands dangled, the metal talons dragging mild grooves as Pat moved to get comfortable on the floor. What do you want? What will you do? And who are you? The studio floor was a distressed brown around the stain of sky. Jan balled her hands up into fists, squeezing tightly. She'd never hidden things from her parents before, not really. It was hard to keep secrets. You had to keep track of them. Regulate how they moved through your body. Made sure they didn't swerve or jump out of your mouth. She never really disobeyed them before either, not like this, not in a way that mattered like this. It made her feel separate and lonely. Pat kept looking at her with no eyes. Jam closed hers and rallied her thoughts, trying to stay focused. She was not alone. Pat was here. She split from her parents. It wouldn't really be the two of them and one of her. It would be 2 and 2 if she didn't send Pat away. But more importantly, Pat was here for a reason. There was a monster in Redemption's house. Even if Pat was wrong, Like Bitter and Aloe thought, that wasn't a risk she could take. It was too big. It was her best friend. It was redemption. And if Pat was right, then there was a monster there. Then it meant no one knew about it. No one caught whoever it was, and redemption was still in danger. Boiled down to that, it was a simple choice. Her parents floated away, Jem opened her eyes, and colored spots hovered in the air before her. I need you to stay, she said. Chapter 5. Late the next morning, Jem was twisting her hair in her bedroom, smearing whipped shea butter on her palms, and applying it in sections while soca music played over her speakers. Pet was standing in a corner of the room, its head moving in small jerks as it followed her arms, watching her. They were walking without sound. Jem didn't want her parents to know Pat was still around, that she had disobeyed them. And since Bitter and Aloe couldn't feel things through the house the way that Jem could, she could hide Pat in a mute cocoon. What happens now? She asked. How does this work? Pat slowed the movements of its head to focus on her. The first step to seeing is seeing that there are things you do not see, it said. Jem paused and frowned. I don't understand. The creature sighed and rustled its fur a little. If you do not know there are things you do not see, it said, then you will not see them because you do not expect them to be there. You think you see everything, so you think everything you see is all there is to be seen. So there are things hiding, Jem said, and you can't find them unless you're looking, like there's the stuff I can see, but there's more? Pat tilted its head in approval. Yes, it replied, there is more. There is the unseen, waiting to be seen, existing only in the spaces we admit we do not see yet. Jem went back to her hair, dabbing castor oil on her ends as she worked through a few tiny knots. So you'll go looking for the unseen things, since you're the hunter and all that. Pat fell silent, and a vague unease began rolling off it. Jem turned, wiping her hands on her jeans. I said you'll go looking, right? That's your job? That's the whole point of you being here? I bring you over and you take care of redemption. Pat grunted. Not exactly, little girl. What do you mean, not exactly? A hunter, yes, Pat explained, but a hunter alone? No. The child they call Redemption is important to you, and you are important to the hunt for the monster in the House of Redemption. Jem backed up. I don't want to hurt anyone, she said. That's supposed to be your job. Pat shrugged, its metal shoulders glinting as the feathers slid over each other. I am not allowed to move so freely in this, your world, it said with a trace of bitterness that pooled oily in the air between them. That is why you are important. You must be a hunter like me. There must be a hunter who is human, who can go where I cannot go, see what I cannot see. Then what do you do? Jem snapped, her words heavy with contempt, laid over a skeleton of fear. She didn't want to call Pat useless, not directly, but the word was hidden under her words, and Pat picked it up. The creature growled low in its throat and changed its body language. Small shifts that bled naked menace into the room. Jem flinched. She had become used to the toned-down version Pat had been showing her, a version that allowed her to forget, even while looking straight at it, what exactly it was, a terror that had climbed through the night and into her life. I will, Pat snarled. Do what you cannot do. Jem looked away. It was impossible not to. Her hands shook a little as she turned back to the mirror, trying to play it cool and not glance at Pet's reflection. She didn't want to show it. She was scared. The soca music played on as she worked on another section of her hair, hectic steel pan and percussion, thumping through the air, her spine prickling. Pat heaved a sigh and pulled itself together, sheathing the threat that it had been sending out. The air settled into a hesitant peace. I know it is difficult, little girl, it said. Our concerns are aligned in this. You want the safety of the child they call Redemption, and I want the monster who threatens that. A hunt can take a long time. A hunter must be patient. For now we do not know enough. Your job is to find out more, and all you have to do is be willing to see, to admit that there are unseens waiting to be seen. Do you understand? Jem nodded, even though the fear was still tangled necklace in her stomach, heavy and iron. Pat came up to her in a single step, its weight silent, like it was both there and not there. It put her mother's severed hand on her shoulder, and its claws curved over her collarbone. I'm sorry I made you afraid. I never meant you any harm. I am here to protect you and the ones you love. Jem looked at its face in the mirror and nodded. It wasn't really Pet she was afraid of, but the job that lay ahead of them, the responsibility, the way she would have to hide it from her parents. It's going to be fine, Pat said. All you have to do is look. If there is something to see, you will see it. But where do I look? Jem asked. I don't even know what I'm looking for. Pat's voice rolled through her head, deep and resonant. It's simple. Start with your friend. Look for something you have not seen. They were interrupted by Bitter's voice, carrying down the hall and through the bedroom door, piercing into their small secret world. You still want a ride, Jem? I'm heading out now. Where's she going? Alice's voice was faint from the living room. You know she and that boy go to see a movie every weekend. Bitter raised her voice to call out again. Jem! Jem closed her eyes and groaned. She hated having to yell, but she didn't want her mother coming into her room either. "Coming," she called back, then opened her eyes to look at Pet, half-formed questions lumpy under her tongue. The creature had already disappeared, leaving her in the empty room with greasy fingertips. She finished her last twist in a hurry, then grabbed her phone and rushed out to meet Bitter. Her mother touched her face gently. "You doing okay, Doo-Doo?" Jam nodded, but Bitter kept looking at her. "You vex us for making you send the creature away? It's a lot to deal with what happened. You want to talk about it?" Jam shook her head, not meeting her mother's eyes, even as she felt Bitter's worry sing against her skin. She hadn't quite forgiven either of her parents for being so dismissive of Pet's warning, for not being with her in the hunt. Maybe she wouldn't forgive them until Redemption was safe, or maybe not even then. The drive to the movie theater was quiet, with only the wind breaking against the edge of the windows. When they pulled up, Redemption was standing on the sidewalk, waiting, tall, whipcord lean. Relief burst large and bright out through Jam when she saw him. He was okay. Even if Pat was right and something horrible lived in this house, right now Redemption was there, and he was okay. Jam let her mother kiss her cheek, and then she hopped out of the car and into her best friend's arms. His hugs were her favorite, solid and strong and never halfway. She locked her arm in his, and they went into the theater, feeling the fresh of his bicep. "He's safe," she told herself. "Right now, he's with me and he's safe." If she said it over and over, she wondered if the words had become a spell that would hold true even after he went home. Jam exhaled when they sat in their seats, welcoming the dark of the large room, the artificial light of the screen that stretched from floor to ceiling, curving in on them. It was a beautiful, secret, and public place. Redemption reclined his seat and glanced over at her. "You okay?" he signed. "I'm fine," she smiled back, but she knew it didn't look convincing. They had been friends too long. Redemption raised an eyebrow and reached over to squeeze her hand. "Whenever you're ready to share, I'm here," he whispered. The light played blue off his dark skin, and Jam patted his cheek, stroking a thumb over the razor of his cheekbone. "Thank you." She had no idea she could even start sharing everything that had happened at her house, how she would explain Pet or the warning it had dragged over. How was she supposed to explain that a creature was coming to hunt at his house, or that Pet's arrival had tossed her out of the world that she used to live in, and left her floating in an uncomfortable nowhere? Everything looked the same, but nothing was. Being at the movies was an escape into a large cocoon of a story, a step away from the outside. The sound drowned out everything else. The walls were insulation for the next few hours. There was no need to talk or think. Jam could pretend that everything had stopped. In the space of that pause, she could breathe. Jam rubbed her upper arm as they stepped outside after the movie. The theater had been chilly, and sometimes the hormone implant in her arm ached when she got cold. Redemption yawned and stretched. "Want to come over?" he asked. "Sure," she said. They exchanged a quick smile and set off down the sidewalk, Redemption whistling, his arms loose by his sides. Jam put her hands in her pockets, grounding herself in the soft cotton. It was weird to be going over to his house now that she knew what she knew, like she was a spy almost, gathering intel for Pet. She didn't like keeping a secret from Redemption, but it wasn't time to tell him about Pet. Not yet. Not that telling would even work. You had to see Pet to accept that it was real in this world. The telling would never be enough. Words are never enough for a lot of things. Besides, Jam wanted to be sure that there actually was someone dangerous in his house. Not like Pet dangerous, which felt like a righteous sword of fire kind of danger, but old-school dangerous, monster dangerous. It had taken the Angels a long time to get rid of that kind of dangerous in Lucille. It was a fight that had started decades before even Bitter was born. The revolution had been slow and ponderous, but it had weight, and that weight built up a momentum, and when that momentum finally broke forth, it was with great and accumulated force. The force washed out the monsters who worked in public spaces, allegedly for the public, but it carried further into the homes and schools. It touched everyone. It made change. People started by believing the victims, and once this was apparent that it was safe to report monsters now, more and more people did so. The monsters always tried to apologize when they were caught, using the same slippery words that had worked for them before. They thought it would be enough, that some would pass and they would be welcomed back as if nothing had happened. They were wrong. There was no twisting away from the repercussions that the Angels brought, justice rising like a sun over the hill in a loud morning. There had been so much counseling, so many treatment programs, so much rehabilitation to be done, so many amends to be made, the makings of how different justice would look. It was no small thing to try to restructure a society, to find the pus boiling away under the scabs, to peel back the hardened flesh to let it out. Jam had heard stories of how horrifying it had been to see the truth of how many monsters there were in Lucille, the public ones, the private ones, the chameleons, the freestyle solitary ones, the charismatic smiling ones. There were so many challenges, like how finding them was one thing, but keeping more from forming was another, like how the work of addressing the wounds they had caused never seemed to end. Bitter had told Jam a little about it, only a little. The story seemed to scald her mouth. "You can't know how happy your father and I were," she said to Jam, "to bring you into a life where you have to go through things like that." Jam had thought herself lucky then, and maybe she was still lucky now, but lucky meant very little when there was a chance that a monster had slipped through the cracks, or that one had formed despite all the dismantling the angels had done. They had done their best to tear apart entire structures, things that made monsters. "We must kill the structures all the way to their roots," the angeless said, "and only then will Lucille be safe." But something must have been missed, something must have gone wrong, because now Pet was here, an exterminator hunting down the rogue monster plant that had grown in Lucille's reformed garden. A stray and secret kind of dangerous. The seed and stems of it were winding through the walls of Redemption's house, and Jam had no idea how she was now supposed to tell which bits were okay and which bits were monster, if they looked the same as they'd always looked her whole life. By the time they got to Redemption's house, Jam had pulled up every ounce of courage she could find. This was a mission, and all she had to do was what Pet had suggested. Try to see more than she'd been seeing before. Look harder for things she maybe wouldn't have thought existed. It would be like having new lenses put into her eyes, shifting the filter through which she took in everything around her, but Jam was ready. This was her part to play in helping her friend, and she was determined to do it well. Redemption opened her front door, and Jam followed him into the house. They were almost knocked down by his little brother, who was running full tilt across the foyer while holding a skateboard, his coiled hair squished by a helmet. "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Redemption grabbed his brother's shoulders. "Why are you running in the house, Moss? You know Mama doesn't like that." Moss tilted his head up and smiled, a tooth missing. "Mama busy in the kitchen. Mama not noticing nothing. Whisper said I can show my new tricks after dinner. I'm going to practice now." He twisted out of his brother's hands and waved at Jam. "Hi, Jammy. Bye, Jammy." Redemption sighed as he watched him hurtle out of sight around a corner. "Boy can't slow down," he said, shaking his head. "Maybe when he breaks his arm again he'll learn," Jam said. "Ha, if the first time didn't teach him, another one won't." They took off their shoes and shoved them into the already overflowing shoe rack. Music and voices poured out of the kitchen, pulling them in. Jam could already feel the familiar warmth of Redemption's house wrapping around her like a soft, fuzzy blanket she'd known for years. She let out a breath and tension she hadn't realized she was still holding unfurled, an open petal in her shoulder. She'd been worried that the house would feel different with what Pat had said, that maybe there'd be a malevolent thread spiking through the air and it would needle its way into Jam's head, and she wouldn't be able to hold herself together long enough to find out where it was coming from. But everything felt the same. The same was good. She hadn't been having this much same the last day. The kitchen in Redemption's house was yellow and enormous, with a long farm table on one end and a large stove system along another wall. Green tiled counters stretching everywhere, an herb basket garden hung from high wooden beams, and the room was full of Redemption's family, loud and soft and laughing. His mother, Malachite, was punching down bread dough in a large ceramic bowl. The sleeves of her linen shirt rolled up to her elbows, her mouth open in a laugh, and her eyes crinkled. His father, Beloved, was sitting on a stool across from her, sketching her face, while the recipient of her smile, Redemption's third parent, Whisper, juggled 3 oranges and a grapefruit. Their eyes focused on the fruit, tongues sticking out in concentration. 2 of Redemption's uncles were sitting at the long table, picking out stones from trays of dried beans, while his baby cousins played under the table. His aunts would likely be out in the garden, whispering some kind of magic to the plants or pulling up weeds. The uncles smiled and nodded as Redemption and Jam greeted them, then fell back to their tasks, a low hum of conversation flowing across the wood of the table. Jam watched as Whisper caught the fruits one by one, dropping their torso into a deep and dramatic bow. When the performance was complete and the air was empty, Malachite clapped her floury hands together. "You're getting so much better, love," she said. "Still only 4 pieces, right? Up your game, Wiz." Redemption grinned as he teased his parent, and Wiz grabbed him in a gentle headlock before letting him go. "You're a rude little rat, that's what you are. Hello, Jam, darling." "Love those twists." "Thanks," Jam signed, smiling as she gave Malachite a quick hug. Breathing in the smell of yeast and flour, the only thing that could smell better would be when the baking was done and there was fresh bread to tear into. Malachite wiped her hands on her batik apron and hugged Jam back, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "How was the movie?" she asked. Jam gave her a thumbs up and then reached across the kitchen island, Dap, Beloved, who reached a fist out from behind his sketch pad, his glasses slipping down his nose. "You staying for dinner?" Whisper asked. Jam glanced at Redemption, who was pouring out orange juice from the fridge. "Yeah, of course," he said. "Stay, Jam." He handed a full glass with pulp floating at the top, and she smiled as she took it. "Okay, perfect," said Malachite. We're having a spatchcock chicken. Jam raised her eyebrows. Fancy. Oh, yeah, Whisper replied. Malachite's roasting them in duck fat. Beloved closed his sketch pad and gestured to Jam as if he had a secret. I've got potatoes and real vegetables in the oven, he said in a low voice, for those principled ones among us who don't particularly feel like eating dead meat. The other two groaned in unison. As opposed to a live meat, Malachite retorted, and even the uncles all the way over the table laughed. Beloved gave the world a long-suffering look, and Jam leaned against the cabinet with a grin plastered on her face, watching them banter. Even as they teased each other, Redemption's parents were always tracking him with eyes full of love. The screen door at the back of the kitchen banged open, and Malachite's sister Glass came in, balancing a large box in her arms. She was wearing a white slip dress, and her feet were bare. You coming through the garden? Malachite asked. Yeah, girl, parked out back. Your tomatoes looking real good. Glass leaned her head away from the box to greet the rest of the room. Hey, y'all. A chorus of greetings echoed back at her. Beloved hopped off his stool to help her with the box, and Jam gave a shy wave from across the kitchen as Redemption hugged his aunt. Where Hibiscus at? Glass asked, looking around for her husband. Redemption frowned. I haven't seen him, actually. Oh, he's out on the side, trimming back some of those trees for me, Malachite said. Glass put one hand on her hip and stroked Redemption's cheek with the other. Y'all ain't have training today? The boy grinned and did some quick shadowboxing. Did it in the morning. He made me run like 6 miles before breakfast. Oh, child, he making you work. Yeah, your aunt knows the feeling well, Whisper said with a laugh. Beloved choked on the lemonade he just poured for himself, and Malachite threw a tea towel at Whisper, who dodged it, still cackling. Don't be making jokes like that in front of the children, she scolded. Glass went to the fridge, smacking Whisper upside the head on her way. You nasty, she said. You ain't never lied. That's enough from the both of you. Malachite glared at them before softening her face at Redemption. Go call your uncle and your brother in, baby. Redemption nodded and dipped out of the back door while Beloved snuck a peek under the lid of the box. Oh, snap, you made pies, Glass? She laughed, tossing a blonde dreadlocks over her shoulders as she poured herself a drink. Lord, no, child, I brought pies. Glass took off the heavy rings she was wearing and slid them into her pocket. Need some help, Malachite? Shoot, always. Grease those pans for me? These ones just like to watch me work. Girl, stop lying. Beloved cut his eyes at her as he put the pies away in the fridge. You don't let anyone but your sister help you in the kitchen. Ain't that the truth? Glass agreed with a little chuckle. She swiped her fingers over an unwrapped slab of butter and began greasing the loaf pans Malachite was going to bake in. Jam put her empty glass down on the counter and exhaled. Maybe her parents were right. Maybe Pat had come to the wrong timeline, gotten the wrong house. Her eyes moved from face to face in the kitchen, measuring the happiness that permeated their skin, their teeth, their air. Redemption and Hibiscus came in through the back door, the screen swinging, their arms wrapped around each other. Moss thundered underfoot, and Whisper caught him, scolding him about a fresh scrape on his arm. The old uncles were picking him up babies, and Hibiscus was dropping a kiss on his wife's shoulder. Hey, Jam, he said when he saw her. How you been? Hibiscus had learned sign language along with Redemption way back when Jam was little, so they could both talk to her, and it always made her feel warm and lovely that he loved Redemption so much it spilled over to Jam. It made him feel like family. I'm good, she replied, chilly. Hibiscus smiled at her. Then he leaned over to join Whisper in looking at the scrape Moss had on his arm. We've got to clean this out, Whisper was saying. Moss made a high-pitched whine and twisted away from them, darting out of the kitchen. We're still going to have to clean it, Whisper yelled after him. Hibiscus shook his head. These kids, man, stubborn as H. Tell me about it. Whisper passed him a beer, and Jam let their conversation bleed out into the rest of the kitchen as she looked around. She couldn't see how any of this was anything other than safe. This was the kind of home that she sometimes wished she lived in, so full of people that you could never imagine being alone, feeling alone again. Not that she felt alone with Bitter and Aloe. It was just quieter in their house, with the three of them, when they had been three, before she chose Pet and separated herself. There was more space in her house. With more space, you had more places where you could be by yourself. Here it felt like people would be pressing on you wherever you went. To be honest, Jam knew that at any other time, the idea of living in such a tumult would have made Jam want to crawl out of her skin and leave her body behind for a little private silence somewhere else. But right then she was a little scared and feeling more alone than usual. The thought of being surrounded by people with all their worlds crying out hers, and being swaddled with their noise, it felt like maybe it could be a comforting thing. Her mission crept back into her head. Her job was to figure out where a monster could be in all of this. Was it one of these people, each and every one of whom she could swear loved Redemption more than their own life? Where were these unseen she was supposed to see? What was she meant to be looking for? Jam had grown up with these people. Malachite had made a birthday cake for her each year, and even taught her how to pipe bright, glossy icing to spell out her name in a sugary cursive. Whisper had taught her how to braid her hair into two thick cornrows, because neither Bitter or Aloe had any idea how to. Beloved sat down with her in Redemption during their first big fight when they were 13 to arbitrate. He taught them how to disagree, reminded them how important it was to do so while still showing care and respect for the person you love. It didn't make sense when Pet had come across worlds and through a broken canvas to say. Jem had been there when Hibiscus cried after Redemption won his first fight, in the victory moment when Redemption had kissed his wrapped fist and extended it to his coach from the center of the ring, blood running down the side of his face, his eyes calm and steady. The cameras had caught Hibiscus covering his mouth with one hand, shocked by his own emotion, by the proud tears blurring under his eyelashes. Jem had run up from her seat to the edge of the ring to take Hibiscus' other hand. He'd been surprised by that, too. He'd glanced down at her and then back at Redemption, but he squeezed her hand tightly and didn't let go for a while, forgetting even how strong he was. Jam's hand had been numb for ages afterward, and she hadn't minded. After Jam's surgery, Glass had come by the house every couple of days, massaging her feet and hands, dabbing oils on her temples and scalp, loving her with their hands. These people were family, had been family. And now Pet was telling her that one of them was a monster? Standing in the glow of that kitchen, Jam couldn't see it, couldn't believe it. Pet had to be wrong, she decided. Yeah, there was no other option. She would tell it so when she got back home. She'd do what her parents had suggested, send it back, fall back to them, to become free again. Redemption was safe. Of course Redemption was safe. She was right here. She could see it, feel it. How could some creature from a painting know these people, her people, better than she did? The decision was a certain immediate relief. Jam dropped her fear like a winter coat and walked forward to help Whisper set the table as if she was stepping into sunshine, leaving a heaviness pooled on the floor behind her. Chapter 6. It was dark when Jem started walking home as she hopped through the large patches of yellow streetlight on the sidewalk. Her steps soft and hopeful. She was going to go home and talk to Pat, explain that she'd been to Redemption's house and had seen everything there was to see, and explain that everything was fine and Pat could go home wherever home was for it, a strange world on the other side of a torn canvas. Afterward, the picture of her life would click back into positions she knew and recognized, smooth and pretty, with no terrifying ripples. Jam slid her hands into her pockets and listened to the crickets hidden in the grass, her earphones floating unused around her neck. The fireflies were dancing dots of light in the dark patches, and the air was sweet. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're wrong, you know." Startled, Jam whipped her head around. Pet was walking next to her, smoke rising off of it like indifferent steam. Its arms hung along its sides. It moved soundlessly, relaxed, as if it wasn't strolling out in the open. In the middle of Lucille, Jam glanced at the houses that lined the street, but Pet chuckled, the sound only in both their heads. "Don't worry, little girl, I am unseen. They can only see you, the one they know how to see." It tilted its head and made a small humming sound, although perhaps you will become a little unseen since you see unseen things now, especially after you see more of them. Jam's shoulders relaxed and she ignored the second part of what it had said. "So you're basically invisible?" Pat shrugged. She wondered if it had picked that up from its short time here. "You can see me," it said. "I am unseen, invisible." Jam nodded and tried to look too much like she was staring up into the empty air behind her. They walked for a few minutes before she remembered its first words. "Wait," she said. "What did you mean I'm wrong?" The creature rolled its head around on its neck. "You are not right," it answered. "You think you are right, but you are missing things, and you are wrong." Jam folded her arms across her chest, feeling prickly. It was talking about Redemption's house. "You don't know them the way I do," she said. Pat swiveled its empty face, and a street light shone harshly off its metal feathers before sliding away. That's precisely the point, little girl. You're knowing. You think it gives you clarity, sight that pierces. It can be a cloud, a thing that obscures. Jam frowned, and Pat rolled its neck again, ruffling its fur. Some of the things you know are not true, it said. You have to learn that things might not be real, even if they look familiar. You think I'm not seeing something in Redemption's house? Pat stopped walking. I am not a mistake, little girl. Jam stopped as well and dropped her head embarrassed. She wanted to deny that she'd been thinking exactly that, but she couldn't. Pat's voice was gentle anyway. It was hard to look at things differently, I know. Jam started walking again, trying not to look too upset. Pat kept up with her easily. Its strides were swallowing up her smaller steps. It would be easier if nothing had changed, she continued. If everything was still pretty and safe, yes, like this little town your angels have made. A pool of water with the moon reflecting in it. Who would want to throw a stone and break the picture? It is fine to be afraid, to have fine fear, to not want to cross a fine line. Jam flinched and curled her hands into fists, burying them deeper in her pockets. I'm not afraid, she hissed. She didn't want to be called that. Afraid meant being closed and not being brave, hiding and not looking. I looked, she said. I just didn't find anything. That's different. She tucked her elbows against her, pressing her arms against her ribs, making herself a tight line. Did you find nothing because there is nothing, or because you didn't want to find anything? Pat asked, its quiet bulk moving beside her. It didn't fit on the pavement, so it walked on the road instead, passing through parked cars as if it was spun out of nothing but nightmare and imagination. Don't tell me what I wanted, Jam snapped. Is there a want in you I do not see? Pat replied. A want to find a monster, to think something bad could be happening to your friend? I don't want anything bad to be happening to Redemption, Jam said, pushing away tears before they could fall. I don't think there's anything to be so terrible about that. Pat stepped in front of her, dropping a knee to the pavement. It became roughly her height, other than the dark red horns rising in the shine of the streetlight, and smoke wafted out of its mouth, smelling like ash. Listen to me, little girl, it said. You want many things. You are full of want, carved out of it, made from it, yes. But the truth does not care about what you want. The truth is what it is. It is not moved by want. It is not a blade of grass to be bent by the wind or your hopes or desires. Pat put its hands on her shoulders, leaning its layered face close to hers. The truth does not change whether it is seen or unseen, it whispered in her mind. A thing that is happening happens whether you look at it or not. And yes, maybe it is easier not to look. Maybe it is easier to say because you do not see it. It is not happening. Maybe you can pull the stone out of the pool and put the moon back together. Jem was crying quietly now. She could feel both the path Pet's words were taking and the way her fear was trying to cover it up with thick briars of denial. She wanted it to stop, all of it, but Pat kept talking, its voice like many hands dragging over an infinite drumskin, creating a thrum that crept under her skin. What if you didn't think about what you wanted, what you hoped? Pat asked. What if you thought about what was happening instead? How does that change your wants? Jem pressed her hands to her face and tried to calm the trembling inside her. Pet's bulk was causing a black shadow over her, but it felt almost safe like a shield. She tried to follow its instructions, think about what was actually happening, but she hit a snag almost immediately. I don't have any proof, she said, dropping her hands. You're the only one saying anything's happening. Pet's face gleamed in front of her. I am the only one saying so, he agreed. But I came across realms to do my job. You can choose to believe me or not to believe me. The truth does not care. The thing that is happening will happen whether you believe me or not. Jam stared into a smoke-filled mouth and thought again, this time with the memories of Redemption's laughter-filled house fresh in her mind. If she was wrong, if her sight was wrong, and she acted on it and sent Pat away, then she would be turning her back on whatever hurt would be happening there, whatever help she could give. Pat moved its head, and the smoke angled newly. Do you want to take that risk? It asked, its voice soft inside her skull. Jem bit her lip. Pat was right, but even if it was wrong, she couldn't take the chance. She wasn't sure how to hold a picture of Redemption's house and family inside along with the things Pat was saying. It felt like one should push out the other entirely, like both couldn't be real together. Jem wasn't sure what to do about it, but it was clear she couldn't afford to throw the possibilities away without even trying. It's not that I believe you, she said after a long pause. I still don't see what could be wrong in that house, but I also don't not believe you. Jem took a deep breath. If there's something else happening, which I'm not sure there is, then I want to find out, she said. Okay? Pat released her shoulders and stood up, moving back to her side as they began to walk home again. Okay, it said. After she got home and Pat faded away, Jem pulled out her tablet and laid it flat on her bed, tapping on the screen to wake it up. Call Redemption, she said, her voice low. The tablet beeped once. The line started ringing. Jem folded her legs on the egg blue duvet and waited for Redemption to pick it up. It took a few rings before the video call connected and Redemption's face appeared on her screen. His hair and skin were damp, and he was drying himself with a towel. Sorry, I was just getting out of the shower, he said, his face stretching into an easy smile. How you feeling? I'm good, she signed, laying the tablet up on its kickstand. You? Chilling. He pulled on a t-shirt and sat down, angling his screen to see her better. Thanks for coming over today. I know it was a lot of people, and I was worried you'd be flooded. Jem shrugged. I wanted to show you something, she said. His eyes lit up. Oh, dope. Jem slid her legs off the bed, taking the tablet with her over to the desk. The heavy library books were there, lying open to the pages with the terrible pictures. They'd been there since the night she'd brought them home. After Pet arrived, Jem had flipped through the pages, wondering if there was anything in there that looked like it. There hadn't been, which made sense, since Bitter had spun Pet out of nothing after all. Jem flipped the camera to show Redemption the illustrations. Whoa, he said, these are wild. Can you zoom in a little? She held the tablet closer, scanning it over the pages, mouth-filled wings occupying the screen. Those are angels? Jem reversed the camera back to her face and nodded, setting the tablet down on her desk. Yo, but they look straight up like monsters, though. That's what I said, she answered, plopping into a chair. Bitter said monsters don't look like anything. Monsters gotta look like something, he said. How else would we know they were what they were? They're all gone. Jem didn't quite believe the line, but they'd been taught it all their lives. Okay, fine, Redemption continued, but monsters must have looked like something at some point. The angels had to identify them, right? Some things must have been obvious. Well, yeah, like if someone was hurting other people all the time. Maybe it's not how people look. It's what they do. Redemption nodded. Makes sense. An easy silence fell, and Jem wondered what to do next. Could she ask him if someone was hurting him, doing things that didn't feel right? How was she supposed to look for the unseen things Pet kept talking about? It wasn't her house. It wasn't as if she could listen to the floorboards talk and trace the secrets. If she could, she'd find the feelings that lay behind the voices when the grown-ups were talking. Hunt without moving, just with her hand pressed to the floor. I wonder what their criteria were, Redemption said. Whose? Jem asked. The angels, when they were hunting. Her skin skittered at the use of that word, Pet's word, but Redemption was right. The work was hunting. Jem tried to imagine Lucille's angels as hunters, remembering how Bitter had told her they'd had to do dark things, hard things. Now they were kindly adults who appeared on TV and came to the schools to give talks. Everyone revered them a little, but no one thought of them as scary, not really. The revolution had ended. There was nothing for them to scare off anymore. Maybe they had been scary during the revolution, though. If they had been like Pet, right, with that righteous, boiling fire. Jem knew Pet tried not to let her see that fire, so it wouldn't scare her, even though she wasn't its target. Did you have to be scary in order to be a hunter? Pet had called her a hunter, too, but Jem didn't feel like she had the kind of power to make anyone afraid. She had just a regular kid, not some painted-into-life creature whose entire purpose was literally to catch monsters. She didn't want to fight or be in a new revolution. She was just trying to help her friend in case he was in danger. Once they could get Redemption out and safe, Jem was perfectly fine with running as far away from the monster as possible. That wasn't what a hunter did, and it wouldn't be what the angels would do, but Jem didn't want to be an angel. She just wanted to be herself. The self she was before Pet showed up and started making her look for unseen and unknown things. So the obvious monsters would have been like the police and the billionaires, Redemption was saying, but the angels must have figured out how to find the ones that weren't so obvious. His curiosity was giving her an idea. What about the library? Redemption laughed. You just want to see Ube, don't you? Jem blushed. Shut up. I'm just saying, that's like your favorite place. I'm going to hang up on you, Jem threatened, laughing. She did love the library, partly because she loved the books there, but also because it was nice to talk to Ube. He'd known Jem since she was a kid, and she came to him often with questions. He'd always answer them, telling her stories attached to the answer, pull out books and send her home with some, and it would always be Jem's favorite part of the day. Okay, fine, Redemption grinned, backing off. We'll go tomorrow and ask your boyfriend. Jem made a face at him, hiding the relief she felt in her stomach, heavy on the lining. If they looked up criteria, it would be like getting a guide on how to find a hidden monster. She might not even have to convince Redemption because he'd be right there looking with her, so he'd know how to recognize a monster. He might even tell her everything right away. Then she'd be able to tell him about Pet, and they could figure out what to do next. Jem's still scared, but the library would have some answers. It always did. It could help them know what was unknown. Jem smiled at Redemption. Thanks, she signed. Redemption shrugged. All knowledge is good knowledge. See you tomorrow. Jem turned off her tablet after she hung up and then burrowed under her covers and took some deep breaths. She expanded her stomach like a balloon in the inhale and imagined stress leaving from the crown of her head on the exhale. Pet interrupted her by appearing slowly, a heaviness displacing the air. Well done, little girl, it said in her head. Jem growled and reached an arm out of the covers, grabbing a pillow and throwing it as hard as she could in its direction. Go away! She thought she heard Pet chuckle softly before it obliged her, by fading into emptiness, leaving a tang of pride in the air behind it.